Look, we'll introduce ourselves in a moment. This is episode 2 of the Harnessing AI series. This one's focusing around smarter screening, better relationships. Uh, for those of you who may not know me on the webinar, my name's Josh McCall. I'm a senior account executive with Bullhorn. I look after everything from relationships with existing customers through to customers that are looking at exploring Bullhorn across the Asia Pacific region. And with me, I've got Nathan Green as well.
Yeah, hello everyone. I can see quite a few people that I recognize in the attendees list, but for those who I haven't worked with before, I'm Nathan. I work alongside Josh out of our Sydney office at Bullhorn. I've been with Bullhorn for just over 7 years, and I work alongside our various teams from our large business to medium business to small business. And I've worked alongside quite a few agencies, especially of late, looking through their AI strategies where some have none, some have really comprehensive strategies. We've got some interesting things that I think we're going to show you today.
Perfect. And for those of you, as I did mention, it is a series. I think that's the third time I've mentioned it now in the first 3 minutes. But episode 1, we had Eric Mative speaking about what's next from Bullhorn. So that really focused around the state of the industry, how the AI impact and how we're approaching AI. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, you can go to our website and it's under our resources section up the top there. Today's session, we've highlighted what the topic is, working around that screening space. And there's 2 more coming along in this series. One is around finding top talent with search and match. And then the final part is a customer insights panel as well. So customers that are utilizing the tools, hearing how they're using it, what impacts they've had, what their lessons learned are as well. But before we jump into sort of what I wanted to discuss with you all, I wanted to start with a poll. So there's going to be a question up on the screen there that talks about how you're describing your current candidate screening process. I'd like you all to take a moment and just vote in that poll. It's a single choice. We've got 3 options there. The top A is efficient and streamlined. B is structured and largely manual. C is inconsistent and time consuming. And D is not sure.
I think what's interesting is having worked alongside quite a few agencies, there's varied processes. What we've found is that it really varies, especially between size of business and then the primary industries or sectors that a business operates in, really determines what these processes tend to look like. And what we've also found is that even within a particular size of business and a particular industry, you'll find that there are really varied screening processes based on how you let your staff operate, for example. So in some businesses we worked with, we've seen that between individual staff, there are totally different ways of managing that screening process as well.
Yeah. And I think they're looking at ways to remove those inefficiencies or the manual processes that stick by there. And it's, okay, how do we leverage technology to assist with that? And we're going to dive into that a little bit more today. So as you can see, we've got the results up there now. So look, a lot leaning towards that structured but largely manual, which we were expecting. And I think it's a big call out to say there's one person that says it's efficient and streamlined. What we would like to focus on is those sort of 2 pieces there that took out majority of the poll responses: inconsistent and time consuming, structured but largely manual. And how do we leverage technology? Now, when we think about this, though, the first thought is from any recruiter is, but are my candidates want to go through virtual screening? For example, when I worked in recruitment, I specialize in high volume temp or contract technology recruitment. So software engineers, developers, cybersecurity specialists. And if I was servicing a role, there would be hundreds of applications coming through at any given time. Some of them may not be in region. Some of them may have been not the right fit. They might have been too junior. And the task that I was given in the business was to speak to every single one of those. Now, if you would have asked Josh 4 or 5 years ago, would my candidates go through a screening process, or are they ready for AI? Do they want AI? I would have probably said absolutely not. And if I'd probably be a little bit apprehensive about it. But we actually went out and we did survey candidates. So we run our grid report for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Bullhorn runs 2 reports each year. One is a talent trends report where we survey talent in the market and understand what their thoughts and needs are and what they want from the recruitment life cycle. And then the other is our client-facing one. So that is about what is the industry trends that recruitment agencies are seeing. But what you're seeing now is candidates are actually ready to engage with AI. So they're willing to work with it if they're going to speed up the process. They're willing to work with AI throughout the process if it means that they're going to get to a result quicker. The other pieces as well, they've also said that when they know that they've been engaged with AI or working with AI, they've received faster responses. They've gotten through the process a lot quicker. And then there's a last piece as well, which is I think really relevant in the market when you're trying to retain top talent, is working with AI. They said that the jobs were more relevant to their experience. So for example, there can be times where you've had Josh McCall, and Josh has been a software engineer, but I was that 7 years ago and I moved out of that industry and now I'm a teacher, but still getting emails. I got an email just yesterday actually from an agency that was asking me if I was interested in a BDR role or an SDR role, that is me 7 years ago now. So what we're looking at is how can we make AI match talent faster, but more on point with what their current skill sets are and where they currently are in their job search. And this is from our actual grid survey around clients and customers and agency leaders. Agencies that gained revenue last year were saying that they're in their advanced stages of digital transformation. Now, when we're talking about digital transformation, it's, are you utilizing your system to its full degree? Have you worked on your data? Have you looked at your workflows? Have you done a workflow review? Have you looked at, okay, what other technologies can we utilize to help make our recruiters' life easier? So there's a few things that are actually required in laying the foundations and getting it to the right point. And when you've done those, it's only possible though if you've worked on that workflows and data piece. So the next step is you've done your digitization. You're now looking at automating some processes as well. So based again off that survey, people who are using automation, they're saying that they're 36% more productive. So when we're talking about automation, we're talking about removing tasks that slow a recruiter down, that it could be that they don't want to do or that they forget to do. So if we're looking at a live example of that is screening call happens, the note doesn't go against the candidate record. Screening calls completed, they don't get moved along the stage of the pipeline efficiently. They might not be the right fit, but they're not getting a notification saying, hey, not right now. So 60% of our customers that are using automation with Bullhorn, they've grown significantly since 2020. So those customers in comparison to non-automation users, they're 36% more productive. So that's what we're looking at there. So how do we take that a step further? So we know that companies that are using automation, they're 36% more in productivity just from that automation lens alone. Now let's add agents in there. So when we're looking at this, agents, they add another 20% of productivity in there. So we're compounding the productivity. And what we're talking about there is think about providing your consultants with essentially a virtual assistant. That's what we're talking about when we're looking at agents inside of your workforce. Because we're looking at assisting your consultants everywhere across the workflow, whether that be embedding it in the workflows, whether it's helping them write job advertisements, whether it's helping them add notes back into the system. They could be a step where one of the biggest tasks that recruiters have is to draft an email floating a candidate out, and they sit and they get sort of frozen about how do I start this email? How do I compose this email? Utilizing AI to help composing those emails to get them started is one big part. But then the big part that we're going to explore today is how do we screen candidates using AI as well. So screening agent that we've released this year, so this isn't part of our new product suite that we have released. The screening agent is there to remove recruiter responsibility from the screening process, not take it away from them fully, because there's not going to be every scenario where this will work for them, but remove it the best that we can to help them be more productive and ensure that all applicants are getting screened and improving their experience. So what essentially will happen is the candidates will access this via a portal. They use their voice to answer the screening questions. The portal is accessed via a link sent from Bullhorn Automation and via email or SMS, depending on what function you're utilizing. Then the report is sent back to the recruiter. So Bullhorn updates how the screening goes and how it went, and the AI agent will rank the candidate and produce with them a comprehensive report with a summary, analysis, skills assessment, and a score with a detailed explanation for the recruiter. The agent asks questions as well and can be asked questions in return and modifies its question flow based on previous answers. So the welcoming message and the wrap-up can be customized. We're looking at, okay, these are the questions that are based off the job, and then how do we add your own flavor in there if required? So what I think we're going to do now is, Nathan, it's best that we jump into the demonstration, show what it looks like, and then we'll continue on from there.
Yeah, I think it's a really good call out. Where it really helps to think about this is from the perspective of how, as a recruiter, will you be experiencing this sort of interaction between the system and the candidate? So what I want to do is I want to walk through a bit of an example in product. So this is a live environment. I want to step through what this would look like from both the consultant and the candidate's perspective when it comes over and how that interaction plays out. Now, in this case, I'm logged in, I'm looking at the system through the perspective of a recruiter, and I've jumped into a job that I've just added into the system. You'll see on my job here, I've got an internal job description, some other details that sit inside of there. And this is the first part where the screening agent really comes into play. Now, many of you who work in a traditional recruitment business will know that when candidates start to apply to this job, or when we add candidates as shortlists from our existing database, we've got to go through some sort of screening process. And that poll earlier showed us that for a lot of you, it's structured, but it's largely manual. What the Bullhorn screening agent does to speed up the start of this process straight away as soon as a job is added into the system is that it goes through and it's able to automatically generate a set of screening questions. So as a consultant, I've added a job into the system. I've simply put something like a job description in. And off the back of that, it's gone and generated a series of screening questions based on those details that are entered in at a job level. One of the key advantages that AI has when it comes to thinking about these sorts of screening questions is that it has access to all the web's worth of internet. So it knows everything about Java roles. It knows everything about programming. It knows about the different technologies that are related to that in a way that only someone with very specific niche industry experience would know. So with just the information we've entered in at a job level, it's gone through and generated a number of questions based on how we've configured it. Now, in my case, you can see that there are a total of 6 questions it's generated. It's gone through and asking things like, what's your experience like? What's your backend experience like? Do you have experience with RESTful APIs? And at the very end, we also have a default question that we've incorporated in there, asking if the person has any flexibility on compensation requirements. Now, while this does complete the task for the consultant, it doesn't take the control away from them. With these screening questions that are automatically generated, the consultant can come in and view those. They can edit the screening questions, change anything about a question that's been created there, delete them, add their own questions in. But the idea is that it takes the start of that process once the job's added in and massively accelerates it so that it creates relevant screening questions within a framework that your business has created. Now, going back to our job record, let's say in this case that we have this job created, it's a Friday afternoon, and I post it online, it's 5 p.m. and I clock out. What often happens in these scenarios is that applicants who apply to this job Friday evening or over the weekend, they've got to wait until Monday to actually progress that application, get in touch with someone, start the screening process. In this case, as those candidates apply for the job online, instead of waiting for someone to reach out to them, whether it is Friday evening or Saturday morning, they can get an automated message from the screening agent that says, hey, thanks for your application across to the senior software engineer role. We'd like to invite you to do a virtual screening. What's really important about this is that you can have that start of the screening process, the generation of the questions, and the outreach to people who apply online be an automatic kickoff process, so that way you're not relying on a consultant to start it. What we often hear is that it's probably not going to be relevant to every single role, probably not going to be relevant to every single recruiter, but you have a tool now that allows you to kick off that screening process and accelerate it in the beginning. Now, for Shane, who's a candidate that applied for that job, I want to jump into his perspective and show you how he might interact with a screening agent. Now, in many cases, you don't just want to send candidates directly across to get screened. What makes more sense is to maybe ask them a few questions first. So for Shane, we're saying we're excited to work with you, but we've got a few quick questions for you, and then we'll jump into our voice discussion. So Shane clicks on the link, which takes him across to your company website and then overlays a chatbot. Now, if you're familiar with Bullhorn Automation, this uses the chatbot functionality from Bullhorn Automation because we might want to screen out to make sure that the person is a good fit for that role. You might ask questions like, do you have work rights within Australia? What is your preference when it comes to employment? Do you want permanent or contract-based employment? And then any other questions that you might have over and above that, where it might be important to ask the person, are you comfortable speaking to an AI screening agent? What's really important in these processes, especially when you're incorporating new technology, is giving the candidate control. If they're not comfortable or incapable of engaging with a screening agent, it's critical that you give them the ability to choose if they're going to do this. Now, as Shane, I could select no, but in this case, I'm going to select yes to accelerate my application. And based on my answers to those questions, I do have work rights, I do want a permanent job, and I am happy to speak to a screening agent. It then generates the link, which I can click on to take me across to kick off that screening process. Now, what's really important here is that it's able to go through and ask all the questions that are related to the job that it's created automatically for us. So with Shane, I've clicked across to the link. It takes me into a portal where on the left-hand side, I can see details about that job that the business has chosen to expose to me. And on the right-hand side, I can see the instructions and the ability to start that interview. What's really important here is that the entire process engages with AI and goes through automatically. So with Shane, as I click to start the interview, that process will kick off and the screening agent will begin speaking to me on the right-hand side of the screen.
Hello, this is Alice, an AI agent for Acme Recruiters Australia. I am going to interview you for the Senior Software Engineer position. Are you ready to begin the interview?
And what it's able to do is go through and begin to ask questions, wait for the response, and it's going to parse exactly what you're saying. So as Shane, I don't need to write down any of the answers to questions. It picks up what I'm saying and then translates that into text and then analyzes what I've said. Now, in this case, it's going to be quite confusing for the screening agent because I haven't just said the word yes.
I didn't quite catch that. Are you ready to begin the interview?
Yes, I am ready.
Great. Let's get started. Can you describe your experience with developing software in Java, including how many years you've been working with it and the types of projects you've completed?
I've got lots of experience.
Could you provide more details about your experience with Java development, including the number of years you've been working with it and the types of projects you've completed?
Now, I'm going to end the interview here early. And the reason for that is that I'm not going to sit here and go through every single question, but it's important that very quickly there, I showed you a couple of things. It takes what you're saying, converts it to text, analyzes the sentiment and what you're saying, and then gives a response off the back of it. Just briefly there, when I tried to give a 4-word response to a question, it pushed back and asked for more detail on the answer to that question. Now, as each of these screens are completed, so as Shane, I've fully completed this screen, all the responses from me have been taken and parsed and I've been scored, then an email is shot across to the consultant, the owner of that job, to say, hey, Shane Bruce just completed that screen. Here's some details about it. So from the perspective of the consultant, I'm told immediately when someone's completed a screen and given a lot of detail about that. The email is the first place that I'm probably going to see that, but back inside the system, it also gets tracked underneath the job and the submission for the candidate. So on Shane's application, it will have the details about his screen as well as the score that he received. What's really important here is if we jump back into our scenario, as the consultant, over the weekend, that screen has taken place. Now on Monday, I come back in, I can see Shane's completed a screen. He's gotten a score of 52, and I can see a summary by the AI agent. I can see it tells me about Shane. It also tells me an analysis of the conversation and then suggested focus areas. Now, in this case, in one of the screens that I took, I didn't give very specific responses. So it calls out that Shane didn't provide very specific responses to experience with Java. What it also does is, as I go to pick up the phone and talk with Shane, it gives me a series of suggested focus areas. Given that I didn't give specific examples about my experience with Java, it's saying that I should encourage the candidate to give detailed examples about experience with Java, highlighting specific projects to showcase their proficiency and accomplishments. So the idea here is that not only does it perform this initial screen, score the candidate, save all that information back into Bullhorn, it gives me, as the consultant, the information that I might need to carry out a secondary conversation with someone like Shane. What we've noticed and what we've received feedback on from our customers who have used this in the early testing phases is that it allows you to identify candidates that you may have missed in the past. Because if someone is extremely proficient, but they have a bad looking profile, they're able to go through this screening process, show that they're able to be scored quite highly in the 90s, and then the consultant is informed that you have a great candidate off the back of it. What they're also able to do is have additional automation that takes place after this screen happens. So with our screen, if we have a candidate that scores above a particular amount, we might want to make an automated step that happens off the back of it. Or if they score below a particular threshold, again, that might be another opportunity for automation. What often we have conversations about with our customers is, as we're going through this process, as I'm adding a job into the system, I want my consultants to be able to control what automations and what AI is being used in the background. So what some of our customers have done is they've added a card to the job record and to the candidate record where, as a user, I can choose, do I want AI to do things like generate a job description automatically? Do I want it to match candidates to the job automatically? And for those candidates who apply online or who I shortlist, do I want the AI screening agent to reach out to them? If you enable controls like that, then you're able to put that back in the hands of the consultants who can choose selectively where they would like AI to take place. And AI becomes a tool that you're able to use rather than something that's enforced on your staff. There's a lot of flexibility that sits around that. Now, Josh, I'm going to pass it back across to you just to go through a couple more things on your side. But hopefully from that, you saw there's a process that can be incorporated. And the way that we've built that in is not in a way that it has to be used by everyone in every business, but as a tool that you can flexibly build into your processes in ways that make sense.
Yeah, and I think if we've seen now where Nathan's come in there and shown the screening process, and I think what we want to start to talk about now is what does the future look like? So how it comes into action is the new way of working that we're envisioning this is job comes from a client, jobs automatically then enriched by AI, utilizing AI. Then the top candidates are automatically matched to the job. They get sent that hyper-personalized message that's kicked in via AI again. And you'll notice how many times I'm saying AI through this as well. But candidates then get screened by the agent. They get the link to request time to book in with the recruiter. Recruiter validates them. They're focusing on the right people, so they've had the ability to widen the funnel very quickly, shrink it back down, and only focus on where they can get closest to the money. And then they're at the position where they're presenting it back to the client. And this is when Bullhorn AI comes into action. This is when it all becomes agentic, and it comes back to what we were talking about before. So you've got the enrichment happening, you've got the matching happening, the messaging, the content is going out to the candidates. Every single candidate's getting touched. They're getting screened. There's the message to say, hey, come back and let's talk further. And then they're getting progressed. So if we go back to what they're looking at and where they're looking, what they like about AI is we're putting them in front of the right jobs every single time. So we've got 4 minutes now. There has been a couple of questions that have come through that maybe Nathan, you and I can field those. We can try to field those. So there's one here that with AI sending the questions to the candidates, I assume that it doesn't send it to all applicants, just the ones that AI has decided are good applicants.
That's a really good question. So when it comes to the way that AI is reaching out and sending questions, it's actually something that as a business, you fully control. So it's not a process that is uncontrollable or set by Bullhorn. The reality is that you as a business, as you start to use this tool, decide, I want all candidates who apply on an online source, like let's just say for argument's sake, something like Seek or LinkedIn. I want all of those applicants who come in to automatically receive a screen. Or perhaps you only want those applicants to receive a screen if they live in a certain area. Or maybe you ask them some questions, and based on the answers to those questions, they can be screened. Ultimately, as a business, it's entirely up to you what that process of outreach and screen looks like. We do not fix that in any way.
Yeah. And I think just furthermore to that is there's going to be arms of your business where this is going to be extremely fruitful for you. And there's going to be other arms of the business that might need a higher touch. So I spoke to somebody just last week around, they've got a function that's purely executive search, but they're focusing on CEOs. And what they need to do is for them to be able to present the candidates back, they have to speak to every single one personally themselves. So for that part or that portion of roles that they looked after, it wasn't going to be relevant for them to be putting that screening in there. But they also had then another arm where they did contact center work. And they were happy to put everyone through that contact center work for the screening process. But you mentioned, Nathan, Seek and the like there, which probably leads into the second question is, what if I'm not using job boards?
The reality there is that it's based around the Bullhorn submission record, which you might know as the shortlist record or the application record. It simply represents a candidate who has been attached to a job. So long as a candidate has been attached to a job, whether that be manually adding the person in, or if it's shortlisting from the database, or like in the example we used from an external source, it doesn't matter. You can kick off that automated process off the back of it. And you've got full control over who receives those and on what job they receive them as well.
Yeah.
I think it's probably worth touching on at the same time a couple of other points that seem to sort of sit around that. With the flow back of the data, the information about that screen can go out to the consultant via email. It can go back against the job as a note, and it also can get tagged against the candidate as a note. What's important is that that data also gets stamped against the person's submission record. So we capture their score from the screening, whether they've completed it, how long they took with the screen, for example. All that data is in there as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, look, we're coming up to time now. So I do know that there's still a few more questions in there. What I will mention is your account executive will reach out to you with the responses if you have asked a question in there. I do see a quick one that I can answer very quickly. I missed the first session. Can I get the recording if it's available? So this session, as well as previous sessions, they will be up on bullhorn.com/au. Will be under the resources section. So you can go back and you can watch this webinar, any historical webinars as well. And we can make sure that this session as well will be sent out to everybody that's on the call, or if you've missed the call as well today and you're watching this in the future, I guess. Cool. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Nathan, for joining me and adding the technical brains as always. But yeah, we'll talk soon.
All right. Looking forward to seeing everyone in the next session.
Bye.